And these are rubbing stencils that you can just buy here. They have an image of some sort. Some have fish, for instance. These I got at stickblick.com, so you guys can get some of those. And what you're going to do is you're going to place the foil paper, but first I want to get rid of that mark on the foil. I usually get those foil pieces that have already been pre-cut so that it makes it easier for me to put them on there for so many students, especially if I'm doing this step for them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place it right onto the stencil, and I'm going to wrap it all the way around. Make sure that the actual image has the relief part onto the top where you're going to place the foil over it. And I always like to use the shiner piece, or the shiner part of the foil on top. When you guys are finished with that step, then you can go ahead and just, with a nice soft cloth, you can start rubbing on the surface to create the embossing. And you'll start to see how the image from underneath will start to appear as you continue to rub on the surface. And best if you press with good, sort of with some pressure on it, good amount of pressure, and just rub all the way around until you can see the image really well. Now my cloth here is very soft, so it's not making any holes or anything on the foil, especially because this is really thin foil, type of foil that you use for baking purposes. So you definitely don't want to press too hard where it's going to tear the foil into pieces. So here's the image. You guys can see that. And it looks pretty good. So now I'm actually able to move on to the next step, which is coloring it with my permanent color markers. So we're going to go ahead and do that next. Color our image, but I just want to let you guys know that if you're working with a large group of students, you can always do the wrapping for them with the foil. Sometimes it's hard for them to actually do that wrapping part, especially if you're working with like kindergartners or little ones, and they can actually do the rubbing part. That's easy for them. So once you have wrapped it around, you have a nice foil piece that they can rub, and then they can proceed. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and start coloring, and you guys can choose multiple colors for it. Just depends on the students. They like to use rainbow colors and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and color this real quick so you guys can see what it's going to look like next. So when you're coloring, though, I do recommend that you use your marker sideways so that it doesn't make any holes on the actual foil. If it does, it will happen on some areas, but it's okay. Just let the students know that you know, stuff like this, it's just so delicate and it will happen, but just try not to press too hard as you go on. And if you have small little holes on it, that's okay, because in the end we're going to add it or mount it onto another piece of paper so that it could create a nice surface for it, so it'll also be more, you know, it's going to protect it. Okay, so I'm actually going to use multiple colors here, kind of blend them in there as I go along. Just add a little bit of the orange, and as you can see, I'm kind of holding my marker sideways. If I do this up and down, I might make a hole on it. So I'm going to just continue to use it sideways there. And just add the color as best as I can throughout. I'm going to add a little orange highlights here and there. Now, I also want to create a little bit more contrast, so I'm going to move over to another tone. Maybe this will be a little bit darker here, so. And I can focus on detail towards the end as well, so I'm not going to worry about, like, the eyes, cover all that in there very nicely with the marker. Another thing that I like to tell my students as they're working on this project is not to scribble the marker on there, to try to cover it as best as possible. And they tend to, those students that have a very loose stroke or very loose hand, they tend to just go all over the place. Tell them to kind of focus on some areas so that, you know, they can actually see what it is that they're coloring, and not just color the whole thing, just one color, unless that's their preference, of course. You know, you just depending on what it is that they choose. So now I'm going to go ahead and focus on some of the details here and create some nice contrasts into the actual picture. So that's another optional thing here, just if they want to do that. So I'm just kind of adding a little bit of that contrast. And you can already see that there's a little hole there. That's okay. Like I said, we're going to add a backing to it to protect it. So I think I'm pretty satisfied with my actual seahorse there. I also want to create some details here. Just going to do that there. Kind of do some more details here and there. Just to add to beautify it a little bit more. And that's something that you can also work in there with the kids. It's good vocabulary for them, and they get to actually focus on the smaller parts of their picture. So then I'm going to go ahead and keep coloring the background and also these seaweed lines down here. So let's go ahead and do that next. How I was actually tracing around it first and then filling it in. So that's something that can help you as you're coloring those big sections on the background. Now for my smaller details, rather than working with my marker sideways, I'm going to work with it a little bit more like just with the tip, more vertical than sideways actually. So I'm going to stand it upright a little bit more, and that way I can really get into those lines and all the little details there. And just keep going until you complete all the background seaweed. that's okay. It will tear, especially when you're working on smaller details. It tends to tear the foil. So just make sure you're not pressing too hard as you continue to fill in your details or color in the foil parts. I'm going to do the rocks with some brown. And at this point, then you're ready to move on to the next step, which is mounting their project onto a construction paper so that I can have some support, and it also creates a nice little frame for it. Instead of using just a solid color, you can also use some nice colorful construction paper or scrapbooking paper that has some pattern to it. So, you know, you can mount it onto that and see what looks best. And I think that color will actually create a nice contrast. So I'm going to use a piece of my scrapbooking paper here to create a nice background for it. So I'm definitely going to trim this part off, maybe just about that size right there. So I'll be cropping this off just a bit. I can go on and remove the actual stencil from the back of my image, and these can be reused many times. As you can see, they have marker all over them from so many little hands that have gone through those. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold this back up again. Just be very careful not to tear it. And I'm going to take some glue, just go all the way around, as close to the edge as possible. Just add a little bit more towards the center part so that it can really have some support there all throughout. Especially if you have like little holes on it, so those little areas. Just gonna spread out some glue on those parts here and there. Take it, place it right towards the center. And creates a nice background for it. And there you go. You have a nice seahorse that you can display. You can even frame it. A wooden frame would be nice. So that's your final product. Thank you for looking at our project for today. Hope you enjoyed it.